going to say is if people wear Essendon Guernseys, they'll get
Essendon Guernseys? Essendon Guernseys? What? Essendon Guernseys? Geelong. Council Member Information Session, Climate Emergency Action Plan, Implementation and Youth Development Plan Review. I would like to welcome councillors and staff to this information session to discuss the Climate Emergency Action Plan, Implementation and Youth Development Plan Review. I will open tonight's proceeding with a statement of acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge this land that we gather on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. This session will be used solely for the purposes of information sharing and not for the purpose of debating issues, building consensus positions or otherwise discharging Council's deliberative and decision-making functions. There is no set agenda and no minutes will be taken during this session. I would like to hand over to Mr Bryce Norton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Redmond, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. As the Mayor mentioned, we're talking about the Climate Emergency Action Plan. So Council adopted that plan in August 2022. Since that time, we've made a concerted effort of pretty much twice each year coming back to Council and providing an update on implementation of that plan. We didn't do the one in December with the change of committee structure. This is the first one that we're presenting now in this workshop format, which we believe is going to be a really good sort of environment to have these conversations, ask and answer questions relative to this plan here. We do have a comprehensive presentation tonight, so I won't take up too much time. But this is sort of building on the idea of what we have achieved relative to the actions and goals within the plan over the last 6 months in particular, but also the last year, and then looking forward as to what the priorities are for the next 6 months. So on that note, I'll hand over to Tim to run through the presentation.
Thank you, Bryce, and good evening, everyone. Maybe that will sit there. I thank you for the opportunity to present our progress on the Climate Emergency Action Plan for 2025. In the introduction, we are showing a number of areas of focus that we'd just like to touch on. So because there is a bit of detail, I'd ask that where possible, keep questions till the end. If not, happy to break and discuss as we go through. The Climate Emergency Action Plan starts off with community goals, as the supporting community is our highest objective, and then it goes into council goals. On the community goals, this is just a general summary. It's bundled together all of the actions, so it's not suggesting that each action has got this same colour of progress. But basically speaking, where there's been no progress, it's a red traffic light. Where there are constraints, it's a yellow traffic light. Some progress is light green, good progress is dark green. On the goals, communities have access to 100% renewable electricity. We've made some progress there, and I'm happy to discuss the detail of that as we go in. I won't dwell on this too much. Communities are supported in the transition to electric vehicles by 2030. We've made some progress there. Connected, safe and cooler walking and cycling routes, that's really been built into our integrated transport strategy, and we've made good progress there. Communities are able to utilise existing and new technology practices that reduce consumption of energy at an affordable price. This one's a bit of a challenge. Also, the building upgrade finance scheme is no longer operating, so we've got ongoing work there. Communities are resilient and prepared to cope with increased frequency of severe and extreme weather events and other natural disasters. We've made some progress, but like all councils, we need to do so much more in that area. And climate risks and impacts are assessed and understood whilst addressing the barriers and risks to action. If we look at council operational goals, we've got a lead goal of net zero emissions for council operations by 2030. And as always, this is an aspirational plan, so it sets high-level aspirational targets and we do what we can to make progress against those targets, like everybody else across Australia is doing. A 25% improvement in efficiency for buildings that require electricity by 2027, and we've made some really good progress there. I haven't got an absolute number on everything, and I'll explain why in a little while, but we've made some great progress. 100% renewable electricity for council by 2023. We had an energy pricing crisis, so we didn't hit that date, but we are pretty much on track to make some great progress in that area very soon. Zero use of natural gas and petroleum gas by 2025. Largely the aquatic centre is our constraint there, and we can't do anything more than that until it has a major redevelopment, so that's a constraint. Council purchasing electric vehicles only by 2030. Yes, it's got some challenges. We've made some progress and still more work to do. Establishing greening of Gawler policy to increase canopy cover from 15 to 30% by 2045 and enhance greening and biodiversity outcomes supported by a water-sensitive urban design. So there's a lot in that, and we've made some good progress towards it. To be a leader in procurement of low-carbon goods and services, precluding single-use practice, eliminating waste and maximising circular economy outcomes. Yes, we've still got more progress to make there, but we haven't done zero. We've done a fair bit, and we need to do more. And establish best practice approach to identifying and managing climate risk for council and our community, and that will be a focus for what we do in the next 12 months, which I'll explain a little bit more. Implementation and assurance is really important. That's why we report back to you every 6 months or so, and we'd like to be recognised as a leader in tackling climate change or taking climate change action, and Gawler is. For the work that we've done in advocacy, we are recognised and respected across Australia pretty much. Just quickly, the next few slides I don't need to speak too much to. These are our emissions charts. Community greenhouse gas emissions profile. It shows last year they were 103,000 tonnes. One important thing with this is that these emissions profiles are based on what they call location-based accounting. So just by being in South Australia, it shows the benefits of all of the renewables that are being generated in South Australia, but you can't use that for making carbon neutral claims. So there's a very real chance that that will change in the not too distant future to market-based accounting. Anyway, what it shows over the past 4 to 5 years is a steady reduction, largely as a result of that renewable energy being generated in South Australia. Council operational greenhouse gas emissions profile. So this is where most of our electricity is causing our emissions. This, on the chart, it shows market-based accounting. This is what we pay for, and this is using the updated accounting method so that we recognise what our contribution is. However, for the past 5 years, we've used location-based accounting, so there's different numbers. You'll notice that the 1,324 doesn't equal 970 tonnes. That's because they're totally different methods for calculating it, and we just have to be aware of that. Using the location-based accounting, it shows a steady decline in emissions over the past few years, and that again is because of all of the renewables generated in South Australia, plus some of the things that we've done to reduce our electricity consumption and another number of other activities. When we get to electricity consumption, you can use some pure data. This is real stuff that's not affected by emissions factors and government policy. This is just the electricity that we're consuming each year. And you can see that in this, we have made some significant gains since the year 2019-20 when I joined. And they are real reductions of electricity, approximately 32% since that year. It's been achieved despite the growth in public lighting assets, installation of pressurised filtration at the Gawler Aquatic Centre and additional infrastructure, all which put upward pressure on our energy demand. But we can have a look and see some of it. So the public lighting project that was completed a couple of years ago, that led to a significant reduction in electricity use for our largest electricity bill, our public lights. About 40% reduction. If we look at the Evanston Gardens Library, not quite a bigger site, but we installed a solar system in 2021-22, and you can see the difference that that has made to the electricity consumption at that site, and that reduces costs, and that's a recurrent saving because we're not paying out so much every year. If we look at the Finner Street car park, this was a really interesting one because the Finner Street car park was our number 4 electricity consuming site, and the lighting was upgraded to use LED lighting and smart control systems, and that reduced its consumption by 50%. That was a really good outcome. If we look at the big and complex Gawler Administration Centre, you can see several steps in that. So overall, in the past few years, it's reduced consumption. We had the 99 kilowatt solar system that was installed just before I got here, much to the efforts of Jack and his team. But then we also had the LED smart lighting and smart control system that Wendy's team had a lot to do with. And then we also had some replacement of air conditioning units, and whenever the air conditioning units are replaced, they're replaced with more efficient units. And those factors together are bringing our electricity consumption down for that big site. And this is including the outsourced, the rented out space in the lower floor, because the whole bill comes in as one. I'd now like to just talk about electricity procurement. This is what's been going on in 2025 and for the past 18 months with Bryce and me working away at it. We're part of the Renew 6 group of councils, which is the City of Holdfast Bay, Onkaparinga, Port Adelaide Enfield, Salisbury, West Torrens and the town of Gawler. And we've been working on going to the market for a power purchase agreement, or the best retail agreement that we could get. The request for tenders that cover large and small site contracts is out, and the tender closes on the 25th of March. We do know already that we've had some strong interest, some big companies looking at the tender documents and downloading those tender documents, so that we're very confident that we'll get a good range of offers. The new contracts are to commence from 1st of July 2025. And in this, it was very much about the opportunity to purchase 100% renewable electricity for council operations from 1 July 2025, because it's all tied up with a much better price for electricity. Just a quick note on our annual expenditure. So we spend, Town of Gawler nominally spends about $800,000 a year on total electricity and asset management charges. That covers large sites and public lighting. About $450,000 of that is for asset management costs. That's not what we're tendering for at the moment, but $250,000 of that is for the actual electricity, or the electrons component, which is currently out for tender. For the small sites, it's about $75,000 for electricity. It's a bit more, but that's a rounded number, nominal number. It includes electricity network and environmental charges, and that's out for tender at the moment as well. And then there's the DIT lighting, which is roughly another $25,000, and we don't have any say in what that charge is. It's a pass-through cost which is passed to us. So in terms of advocacy and reform, the town of Gawler, as an informed and active customer, has strongly engaged and advocated for councils and their communities to improve climate resilience and reduce our emissions, with a focus on renewable electricity, clear and consistent rules, fair pricing and confidence in claims. That's been our strength, and we've continued that on, and we've made some real progress. I'll just mention that in July 2025 will be when Green Power changes its rules, so that the mandatory renewable power percentage, which is about 20% of that extra premium cost that Green Power customers pay, that will be recognised, so that Green Power customers won't have to pay that extra amount anymore. And we've still got more work to do. In the recent past, we've commented on and provided feedback on proposed amendments to South Australia's Climate Change and Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction Act, the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Determination, quite a few times. In fact, that's annual, and sometimes they hold extra consultation on it. We provided feedback on the ACCC consultation on environment and sustainability claims. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol review, we made several submissions to that on the different aspects they were consulting on. The review of Australian carbon credit units, the Green Power review, Climate Active, that review's been going for about 18 months, and we were hoping for outcomes before the election, but that hasn't happened. And the Corporate Emissions Reduction Transparency Scheme. So it's quite a lot of activity. But for the next few months, or the immediate future, There's consultation out now on the guarantee of origin rules, and that's a new scheme that's going to have a renewable energy certification scheme, and that's going to replace the current Renewable Energy Electricity Act that expires in 2030, but it actually starts this year. So it's going to be impacting on voluntary customers very quickly, and we need to get these rules right. There's consultation on the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme on the annual updates. Climate Ready Regions, there's some consultation that the landscape boards have out at the moment, and we're working with the LGA and others to provide feedback on that, because it's important that councils are supported in their activities to tackle climate change and respond to all of these changing demands. And Climate Emergency Australia is the group of councils nationally that have declared a climate emergency, and that's a really good national voice on things that need advocacy, and also for sharing ideas and sharing experience and knowledge. And we're really pleased that Mayor Redmond is on the Executive Committee of Climate Emergency Australia, so we do our best, we will be doing our best to support Mayor Redmond in her efforts this year. Oh, I probably covered all of that, sorry. Yes, it's a peak climate advocacy organisation. New opportunities in that though. What we'd like to focus on in 2025 are the continued advocacy for clear and consistent rules for renewable electricity and carbon offsets, increased advocacy for funding resilience projects, and that's obviously going to be a really big focus as the aftermath of the Queensland floods and cyclone impacts are being felt by everybody, and the consequential pricing impacts on insurance is going to affect everybody right across the country. And also stronger engagement with the community. We think we need to do more to get community on board to a greater level, and we need to be talking about how we can do that. It's also really useful to collaborate locally. So we currently have an informal partnership called Resilient Northern Adelaide, based on sharing knowledge, collaborating on initiatives, and looking at opportunities to access funding between Gawler, Playford and Salisbury, but also with the involvement of the Landscape Board, Northern York Landscape Board and Green Adelaide. And we've really sort of fleshed out that it's an opportunity that Gawler sits right on the border, the boundary between the two, and we've got some clarity that yes, we can go for funding from both boards as it is appropriate to our needs. So that's given us greater confidence to move forward, and where we are collaborating with other councils like Playford and Salisbury, even if it's informal, it gives us a stronger likelihood that we'll be able to achieve those funding outcomes. Local collaboration and supporting our community. So we have the annual plant giveaway program that Hayley has been administering, and that's a really useful way just to keep the Greening of Gawler initiative alive, and that's our biggest adaptation initiative for the town of Gawler. We'd also like to have better knowledge, information, resource sharing and promotion, so we have improved our website. We're trying to keep it updated more often. We've got the direct link from the front page through to the Climate Emergency Action page, and we know we need to do better, so we'll be exploring those, and we can partner with the Gawler Environment Centre because they're doing a lot of work in this space as well. We did put out a post calling for nominations for Sustainable House Day. I don't know if any houses were listed for town of Gawler, but we made an effort, and wherever those houses are, it's great that we're involved, and we can also, because that's a national program, we can also engage with it with our interstate counterparts through Climate Emergency Australia as well. We need to be looking for opportunities for increased stakeholder collaboration across the community wherever we can. On the greening of Gawler, on the left-hand side, we've got some data from DEW. We've got a whole lot of data sets which included heat mapping, canopy mapping, LiDAR and a whole range of data sets that we can use to prioritise where we plant and what we plant. It shows that the tree canopy above 3 metres is about 11.8% in 2022, which is not a huge canopy cover. Of course, that has open space areas, fields and open grasslands as well, so we recognise that. On the right-hand side, it includes green space, which can be the shrub layer and also irrigated grasses and things like that, so it's a bit higher. But it's still relatively low. It's not like the 30% that some of the Eastern Adelaide councils have. So it's an opportunity to understand where we are and look at what we can do. We have been supporting planting and establishment. Our teams track 11,000 trees using Tree Plotter. We are communicating the need for a cooler, greener Gawler. We've got tree species trials that are undertaken, water sensitive urban design pilot projects. We look at linking to third parties and funding opportunities and encouraging all land ownership types to contribute for council streetscapes and open space, private land, residential, commercial and tertiary, and land developments and master planning. And that's probably where we can make the biggest difference, is in those new land developments and in the master planning for those new areas. For 2023, there were 264 street trees planted. The Gawler Greener project established another 300 and new developments put in 258. Our nominal annual street planting was around 250 annually. It's higher now at 300 annually. And we manage this so that we're trying to green where we can, where it's suitable, but still protect those biodiversity areas, the native grasslands, the open woodlands. We don't want to impact on those where they're doing their biodiversity function. It's focusing elsewhere where we can. Council's electric vehicle transition. This is always a challenge, this one. Council to be purchasing electric vehicles only by 2030. This is our aspirational goal. We had in there Action 10.3 talks about a transition plan, and the more that we've learnt, the more that we learnt that we should be doing this internally. We can do it better internally than going out, but we might get some peer review, and we are getting some expert input where it's required, or just talking to people and talking to the RAA and talking to everybody else that's doing it. Obviously, we've got charging requirements. We need to have the charging requirements. It's good at the Gawler Administration Centre, not so good at the depot. We need fit-for-purpose charging. We don't need the super high capacity fast chargers. We may need one of those down the track at the Gawler depot once we go to charging electric trucks, but for now we can get by on the 7 kilowatt chargers and the 22 kilowatt chargers. That will be okay. We need to do the life cycle cost comparison, and this is changing all the time because we've got new models coming on board, and we've got not only new models, new types of vehicles, new pricing arrangements. So for every vehicle, you've really got to look at what it is you're replacing, what would be a suitable replacement for it, and do a total cost of ownership comparison. There's also the possibility, particularly for utes, which are really the high end of the pricing market. They're quite expensive to buy brand new, but if you get the demonstrator models or the ones that have done a few thousand kilometres, they're much cheaper. So possibly we need to be looking at other procurement models. We need to think about what's best. Should we be leasing or buying outright, buying brand new, or maybe buying vehicles that might be a little bit older or have a few kilometres on the clock? For the light fleet, we think that we'll achieve, for our pool vehicles, we can just make the commitment to purchase electric-only pool vehicles by the end of the year. We've still got the light fleet management policy review to be completed before you start getting into the rest of the light fleet vehicles. So some work there. And for the heavy fleet, we knew this would take longer, so we gave ourselves till 2030. And a lot of that, if we changed every vehicle at the depot, every heavy vehicle, we would probably need the fast chargers, one or two. But before that, we might still be able to, even with a 22 kilowatt charger or much smaller chargers, we might be able to get by and still do some more trials and things. Environmental Management Plan Review, I'll just sort of quickly update you on that. So the format of the 2016 Environmental Management Plan is, it no longer aligns with Council's needs because we've got a whole lot of other documents that have very specific actions in there. So we've proposed, or we are proposing, a simplified environmental management plan. It will include an updated policy. It'll include commitments to achieve all our environmental, our legal obligations. It will cover that generally most of our environmental management is covered every day by our normal policies and procedures, but there are gaps there. So we'll also undertake a environmental impact and risk review, and then identify those gaps and then propose how we would manage those gaps. So a simplified environmental management plan is being developed, and a member briefing session will be held in the future. Climate risk and governance, this is an area that Bryce and I have spoken about quite a lot this year because it's changing so quickly. These new risks are coming in. We're really starting to feel the impacts of climate change across Australia in different ways, and we need to be up to speed with what that means. So even though we've done risk assessments before, there is a specific need to be up to speed on climate change risk assessments, whether it's dealing with insurances or risk and governance, or even what they term the mandatory climate-related financial disclosures that have come from the Treasury Treasury Department of Australia, and that's mandating that corporations report their climate risk exposure every year. It's not going to impact on councils just yet. It's only impacting on corporations above a certain size, but there is a very real, real possibility that it will involve local government in maybe 1 to 5 years. So we need to be ready for that, and that means we need to have better reporting and better assessment of our climate risks. Also, communities need to have this. We need to meet community expectations on council operations for things like Code Red and Code Blue, because those situations can come really quickly and be more severe, and we need to look at what we can do. Better Future Principles is about providing an aspirational description of the type of development sought in the town of Gawler. This is a kind of like a missing piece of the puzzle, because we've got the mandatory requirements of the Planning and Development Act and the planning codes. But that doesn't necessarily give us what we need for the requirements for a sustainable and climate resilient future. So one of the ways to do that is to outline where we would like to be as the basis for engaging with government, engaging with land developers, engaging in master planning, and even for our own engagement on developments that council will do in its own right, to make sure that we try and get it right, so that we understand what we would like and we can work and engage towards achieving that. So we'll come back to you on those when we've got them to a point which is ready. We're still having internal discussions about getting them right. The priority areas for the next 6 months are to complete the renewable electricity procurement process. Really high priority right now, and the evaluation will start very soon. Complete the environmental management plan. Do more work around climate risk and governance and what we can do to make sure our executive committee and you as elected members are kept informed about latest developments in that space. And also to make progress on our electric vehicle transition. We're fully aware that this plan is now several years old, August 2022, and we're looking at a review of Climate Emergency Action Plan goals and actions to bring a report back to you on the 25th of March, because some of them really need updating. We've achieved some of them, so they don't need to be anymore. Some of them have to be pushed out for later dates because there are just constraints that we can't overcome. So it was always meant to be a living document that we kept updated regularly, and now's a good time to do it. And we'll be working on these. This is just some example of the things that we'll be bringing back to you and looking at, but we'll prepare a list of ideas that we would like you to consider. My final question to Bryce is, what have I missed?
I don't think anything. I think that'd be a good chance to have any feedback, any questions, queries from members regarding all of that information that's been provided there. Obviously, it's a robust plan and a robust document, and there are a lot of areas of business that it does cover. There's a lot of areas in the community it covers as well. So, yeah, happy to take questions and comments.
The biodiversity management plan, how is that tracking?
The biodiversity management plan is different from the environmental management plan, is something that I would really refer across to Hayley's team. So there's not a cop-out, but it's just that they're on top of administration of that plan. I know that they're doing some work on it. We would like to help them. We would like to get the environmental management plan out the way and then focus on what needs to be done with that. But Bryce, any?
So the biodiversity management plan is a fantastic plan. It has about 36 different actions within that. A lot of those actions have had some action done to them. There's still a long way to go. I think for those of you who, well, actually everyone here was around for a couple of budget cycles ago where I guess I made the very strong point that largely we underinvest in implementing that plan, and I would really, I would love to see more investment in the biodiversity area. I think given what resources we've had, so we've delivered it mainly just with in-house resources and not a lot of extra operating budget. I think we've done a relatively good job, but yeah, absolutely like to do a bit more on that.
Thanks, Wendy.
Just great presentation again, as always, Tim. A lot of information in there, that's great. Just in regards to electric vehicles and that sort of stuff, are we looking at the battery storage for charging? Obviously, you've got your solar and that to run during the day, but are we offsetting the charge at night when specifically the heavy vehicles and that? Are we looking down those lines?
We're investigating that because that, again, is another area that is evolving rapidly. So we've been in touch with a number of organisations. We're going to have a kind of an informal briefing session on what's possible. Ultimately, we have to go out to market. If we decide that we're going to do something, we've got to get a budget for it and go out to market. But what Bryce and I are doing is really keeping our ears to the ground and listening to what's happening and who's doing what in that space. Vehicle to grid is... I get different conflicting views on how close it is. I have been led to believe it was 1 to 5 years away, although currently I'm looking at it for my house and they're saying they can do it. So there's a lot to learn in this space, and yes, you can optimise your electricity costs and opportunities if you do look at those things, but it's early days for us still.
Just another question. In regards to the 100% renewable electricity by council, I'm very sceptical upon that. My view is pretty much how it all works. All the electricity goes into a bucket. You're purchasing the bucket. Out of that same bucket where you've got renewables going into it, you've got coal-fired electricity, and then you get a piece of paper to say that yours is. Guys, grab your input upon that. That's my thought. But.
Yeah, a great thought, and both of those two views, like the location-based accounting and the market-based accounting, are alive and well in competition permanently, and Australia needs to really settle on which one it's going to use to make net zero claims and renewable hydrogen and renewable electricity and the whole Made in Australia Guarantee of Origin scheme kind of depends on getting that right. So yes, it's not about tracking each electron, because you're quite right, there's no way of doing that. However, we pay Origin electricity and Iberdrola electricity for our bills. So we know there's a market-based mechanism that says, well, they've supplied some electricity to the grid and we need to pay them for it. And it's that same sort of approach that we are looking at for renewable electricity. And sure, it's not perfect, and we want to make sure that double counting is stopped and greenwashing is stopped and that the rules are clear and consistent for all parties. So I kind of share your concerns and I understand your views. It's a difficult space to be working in.
Series of questions, yes, could we go back to the slide where we looked at the administration building and the energy savings? And I just want to ask whether we've come to a point where, I think that one there, have we come to a point now where that's as good as it's going to get? And now we're relying on this procurement to drive down the cost, because they're all easy, like low-hanging fruit stuff. So what's our next step?
Yeah, that's quite right. Now, I don't know if that point's been reached yet. I suspect there's probably more that we can do if we really looked at it, but you'll get to a point where it gets harder and harder to make more reductions just by investing in efficiency. So I think we've done a really good job in looking at our large building sites. There has been an electricity working group that Bryce has set up. We haven't met for a while, but that group is looking at where we can make better reductions, consolidate electricity bills and look at efficiency opportunities so that we know what we could do next. I agree it would get harder from here, and I'm not sure how much more. You get to a point where you would need to buy accredited renewable electricity to address the emissions at the end.
Yeah, that's it. My next question is just about the procurement. So we're looking at renewable energy, aren't we? What about the firming component and the effect of the interconnector from New South Wales? How will that affect us for that contract and potentially medium term?
Yeah, so we've been open as we went to the market. The Renew 6 councils have got really good advice from a precinct consultants on this. So they're going to the market for two different options. One is a retail electricity price like we've got at the moment, which is naturally firmed. And then another one for a power purchase agreement, which has got, it is paying a fixed price for the electricity that you buy from the wind farm, and then you've got to have a firming mechanism for when the wind is not available the solar is not available, and that's all modelled and accounted for over a period of time. They run the scenarios for all the different councils for their loads and everything and come up with the plausible exposure, cost exposure, and then you put a cap on the risk and say, well, I'd be prepared to pay for this much risk but not go beyond that. Right. So we're getting options which deal with the two types, retail electricity or a power purchase agreement with firming.
And I suppose if you have, say, for example, pumped hydro, would that then affect the firming price long term?
It would, but it's unlikely that we would get a pumped hydro offer in South Australia. So the offers that we're expecting will be pretty much exclusively South Australian offers.
Okay. The next question is, you have a figure up there that we spend $800,000 a year on energy, and I think it was $450,000 was on admin, and $250,000 was just on energy consumption. Is that right? Did we actually pay almost double?
The non-electricity charges?
Yeah.
It is right. Let's see if I've expressed it clearly.
Yeah, I'm just astonished that it's that much. I think it was a figure that was $800,000 we pay, and you break it down into $450 and $250.
Here we are. For asset management costs. Asset management costs is the price that we pay for SA Power Networks for the public lights to be maintained and the globes changed over. So that's a really expensive proportion of it. It also includes network costs, the price of being a customer before you get electricity to be connected to the grid. That's a fairly high cost. And the environmental costs, the mandatory renewables, the mandatory small-scale renewables, mandatory other renewables. And yes, they do form a really big part of our costs.
Yeah, and I was surprised that the DOT lighting was $25,000. I just assumed that we replaced all the lights on the DOT roads, but we didn't, obviously.
No, we didn't replace any of the DIT lights because they're not our lights.
For some reason I assumed that we replaced all those.
We would hope that one day in the not too distant future, DIT will have the most efficient lights that they could have.
I hope so. Okay. The next one is offsets. That's always been an issue of mine, people claiming carbon offsets. How are we going with that? Because I think that's a rort. But anyway, what's your view on the world of the world?
It's as challenging as the renewable electricity.
Yes.
It's one of our areas why we advocate so strongly for clear and consistent rules, because we don't have clear and consistent rules for carbon offsets. We do have, there's a lot of concern about kind of fake offsets for plantings that were never going to result in any additional carbon. But there's also the accounting concerns in that if you're producing offsets, we don't have the debit and credit rules there, so the site creating the carbon abatement can still claim it on site and sell it as offsets as well.
It's a
and that does create a whole lot of concerns. Again, I have confidence that they will fix the accounting at some stage, and they also need to fix the rorts in it, and there's been a big push on that. I think we need to really focus on what is effective, and offsets will always be a last resort. So once you've done everything else you can, if you've got a net zero target, you will have to buy offsets for the remainder.
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually use that as the first point of call. Now, my last thing is just about the planning. My view of the world is that we should be mandating white roofs and no gas in new developments, but that's just my view of the world. Is that sort of similar to your view of the world?
It's very similar to some of the stuff that we'd like to build in our Better Future principles.
Yeah.
Because there's no need for black roofs.
No, get rid of black roofs. They only use black roofs so that the buildings melt into the landscape. And I think if you get rid of gas, that would solve a lot of asthma problems. And
this is where I guess that we see that there's a lot of opportunity. We get called upon to provide comment for things like Concordia, Cudler, Southern Areas Development, the Planning and Design Code, the GARP, Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, and we haven't to date had a simple document that we could attach to a submission and say, this is the type of development that the town of Gawler would like to support, and that'll give us that ability to do that.
Okay, that's my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to that because I think that's the missing bit, the Better Future principles. Because although you're saying, I mean, it's obviously a complex area, and I think, thank you very much for the report, and we may be recognised nationally as a leader in this. My concern is that within our own community, there's not recognition of what we're achieving. Maybe that's marketing, maybe that's community engagement, whatever, but maybe once we've got these future principles, we can take that back to the community and say, this is what we're trying to achieve. Personally, I mean, there was in the budget, there's 4 vehicles, none of those for the depot, none of those are going to be electric. So all strength to you moving forward on the electric car transition, but I and the community can't see that we're really moving on that at the pass. There seems to be a feeling that there is resistance, perhaps, whereas many people in our community are already there. So look forward to future information.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Sorry, did somebody else come in? Tim, are we using solar panels can we use more in the area? Because on the weekend, when I was in the doghouse, I took the wife for a drive, you know, to have a look at all the new subdivisions and so forth, and that gets me out of stride. And I noticed in a lot of the new developments, solar pad streetlights and things like that, and also up in the area in the borough and out into the station country. All the station people up there have now gone to totally solar because they're on what they call a swear line or something, and you've only got to have a crow piddle on the thing and it stops. And so it's interesting. Do we have are we using enough? I noticed you had 9-something kilowatt one up at the administration centre, and that are we using enough, and can we use more to save more?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. So we've got 6 sites with solar systems installed, and that has made a really good difference to our electricity consumption. There's a possibility to do more. There's a possibility of doing more with the solar that we have if we do include battery storage and other things that we should be looking at. We should at least be understanding what the possibilities are. But as we get to smaller and smaller buildings, it's a bit like the efficiency gains at the Gawler Administration Centre. Your bang for buck starts to deteriorate. So if you're using hardly any power at a site, to put solar panels on that site is not really going to give us a return. There are other opportunities in there if you could, stitch sites together and do things like that, but that's a way off. So really, I think we've done what we can with our existing sites for solar. I think there's more we can do for solar and battery storage, but we have to investigate that.
I think I was thinking of the swimming pool and places like that use a hell of a lot of power and so forth, and I'm not sure. I don't see any solar panels on the swimming pool sheds.
I think there's a very small system there. I'll let Bryce answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So there's a small amount of solar on there that does some of the hot water, but unfortunately the roof doesn't really allow the large scale requirement that is on there. The roof is in wrong orientation, and unfortunately it's quite an old roof, as everyone around here would be quite aware. So we did investigate that when we were looking in terms of the heat pumps on site there, because that would then make that project feasible. It is really a future in the redevelopment of a site like that there, and how you could then incorporate that in a new build or a major redevelopment rather than trying to retrofit it. And also in terms of just taking that to the next step as well, in terms of looking at how we can assist some of our community lease facilities in this space as well, because that is a natural evolution to this as well, in terms of how we're looking to the community organisations and how we might be able to support that going forward as well. So that's definitely on our radar as well.
Thanks, Tim, for the presentation tonight. I appreciate it. I just actually extending a little bit from what Councillor Hennessy mentioned. I guess I understand, I kind of see two sides of the coin to the plan, and one of them is, I guess, from an organisational point of view, like what can we do as an organisation, as a business to improve and reduce our carbon footprint, which makes perfect sense, and a lot of work, I guess, that gets done potentially behind the scenes, but is obviously still a great outcome. And then there's, I say, more the front of house advocacy, community side of stuff. So that's, you know, you rocking up to the conferences, you know, I guess being part of these groups proactively around the state in other local government bodies. A big part of the plan mentions too is about education, and I think, like, for example, the Big Map programs that have been done with the community have been really successful in not only educating community members on what they can do, but also it kind of shows it gives them an insight that we are actually doing work in this space, and I think obviously we all know that they are, but I kind of maybe can see where Councillor Hennessy is coming from, where potentially an argument could be made that, oh, there's a whole bunch of money being spent and we're not seeing any outcome, you know, the earth's still getting hotter type thing. Maybe as a suggestion, I understand that you're constrained with time limitations and staff, etc. But if there was potentially a bit more focus moving forward on some of those community outreaches, and maybe that is programs through the libraries or through the connecting with schools, or, you know, things like that, which, you know, I guess going to that captive audience already, and even if it is simple things like what can you do to reduce your carbon footprint type stuff, potentially, I guess it's a suggestion, but maybe also a question of what work has been done in that space, or is there any talk of that moving forward?
Yeah, look, thank you for that. I think we know that we need to do more in that area, and it is a challenge to do. I think there are some opportunities as we get some more clarification on, you know, the green power reforms, on the climate active outcomes, and rules become a lot clearer. Then we'll be in a better position to advise the community on what they can do and have some confidence in what we can provide them. And I think working through the libraries is a great suggestion. We've identified that working through the Gawler Environment Centre would be a great thing to do. And to get back to sort of building that local movement would be something that I'd really like to see. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day priorities and forget that we need the support of our community to do this, and for the community to succeed in what they're doing. So all I can say is thank you. We have listened and we'd like to do more in that space.
Just one little piece of the puzzle, which I'm not even sure I've spoken to these guys about. I'd like to have a conversation at some point, fairly shortly, with the council about looking at the community solar initiative that some of the metro councils, like Mitcham, and I know Burnside's going down the route now. I think they're a really good opportunity to help our community with cost of living and also greenhouse gas abatement. It's a bit of a win-win. So I haven't got a time frame in mind on it, but I'd like to have the discussion sooner rather than later. I think it's an opportunity, to take your point, Councillor Hennessy, for us to be a leader for our community.
I think we're doing good work in this space. I know it was always a hard one when we were working through in the working group on how we actually juggle these actions, and we always made sure that 90% of our actions were in a position you could actually show a return on investment, and electricity being that big piece. If we talk about the aquatic centre being one of our main consumers, absolutely, if our roof is the wrong way, but is there an opportunity to do that car park solar piece if there is a feasibility or return on investment model that we look at, just those sorts of thinkings. It's been great to see some positive movement in that space in council, and we are seeing those curves, but yeah, when you start getting to the point where we've picked all the low-lying fruit, with no disrespect, I mean, obviously that's a body of work in itself, but then how do you go to the next level again? Just to Councillor Hennessy's point around the 4 vehicles, unfortunately, the way the market sits at the moment, those utes don't have the comparative in electric yet, I don't believe. Or they're coming online soon.
They're available, but very expensive.
Okay, so sorry, when I say comparative, I mean that the cost, benefit analysis, the towing capabilities, and all the things that we do expect from utes in this industry. But it is an interesting space to keep in mind. But I think the methodology of the transition going through the pool vehicles, and you look at a Toyota Camry and you look at the equivalent and whatever else, I think the market has a few of those. Starting and being the guinea pigs on some of the electric utes side of things, I think would be a pretty ambitious test case. So when we are trying to get our message out there, maybe that's something we should be making sure that we're clear on. So yeah, it is great to see, and it is good to hear that we are going to see some of those upgraded actions flow through as well, because in the working group, it was acknowledged quite regularly that it needs to be a fluid document. We do need to track actions where we're actually completing them, and where we haven't been able to, and why, because that piece keeps that engagement, I believe. So keen to see how this all plays out. Now, just in relation to draft budget, can you remind me what level of investment or what projects we're sort of spruiking coming into the 2026 financial year budget, and what we're hoping to achieve with that money, that spend, and that return on investment? That might have to be a question on notice, or you might be able to turn it around.
I think Bryce will be able to nail it. I'll just say that one of the priorities this year is to have a focus on our knowledge on these things that have changed. So just reflecting on Chris's idea and the idea of even charging stations. A lot of these have developed quite a lot in the last 12 to 18 months, and what was maybe a new idea a while ago, somebody else has now demonstrated. So there are opportunities for having other options for public vehicle fast chargers to be built that wouldn't be necessarily on the council books, and that's going to help the community and help us. There's also opportunities to look at the community solar programs where other councils have done it and shown what the pitfalls are, what the benefits are, so we can learn for that without having to take enormous risks ourselves. And even things like solar, larger solar projects could be done by third parties, so there's no outlay by council. So we need to sort of keep those things in our minds as we're looking for future opportunities. Might not be here yet, but that's something to look at. As for the next year's budget, I think I'll hand over to Bryce, but my focus would be over the next 6 to 12 months is really build on what we know about governance and risk and opportunities, so that we can make good decisions on projects in the following year. Bryce.
Thanks, Tim. So yeah, in the current draft budget, there's $20,000 allocation for the implementation of the Climate Emergency Action Plan for next year. A significant component of that is actually involved in the updating of the LiDAR and the data relative to tree canopy and urban heat mapping, which will occur towards the end of next financial year. So there's a component that goes along that there. Additionally, as Tim mentioned there, a real focus will be on trying to achieve a lot with a little amount of a financial contribution relative to our risk and our governance understanding to be able to apply that going forward. And definitely not just reading the room here, but there's a couple of events we've got sort of planned for next year, whether they be community events around, there's an action within here, a carbon neutral event, trialling that there to be able to show the community what goes into things like that there, as well as trying to get some community sort of forums occurring as well. So that's what we're trying to achieve out of that amount.
Yeah, so there's also then the $5,000 for the native plant giveaway to continue that as well.
Slightly different subject, but just going back to that Better Future Principles part that was brought up there, I'm just wondering what does that sort of cover, and which action has that sort of fallen out of? How and how sort of broad does it go? Where does it sit in terms of planning and future development?
Yeah, that actually came out of the greening of Gawler initiative in the Climate Emergency Action Plan, but it was felt that that wasn't really broad enough and capturing everything. So as we were preparing the greening of Gawler principles, we kept running into these other parts, and then we changed the name to Better Future Principles, which would cover more things. So that's why it's not a direct correlation back to that, but it's that idea.
So what is that document?
So the document, I'm not sure what slide it is, but it's really our aspirational document of how we would like to see development occur in Gawler. So for more sustainable housing, to support the transition to renewable electricity, support the transition to electric vehicles, to support the greening of Gawler, to encourage people to support greening activities on private land, on the streets in front of their dwellings and businesses, and really get behind what we would like to see. And it can include things like, we would like to see not all black roofs. Mm.
So it would cover things that would go from something as detailed as engineering principles all the way up to, if you're a big developer and you're coming in to do a Springwood style development, especially with all that land we've got in the SRA that we're talking about, does it go all the way to, this is the canopy cover that you need, we want to achieve in that area, and then down to the engineering principles of, you must have this colour roof, solar panels, etc.
We have envisaged it as a document with links. So at the first opportunity, we just want a really high level document that's just a couple of pages long, 2 sides of an A4 handout, and that covers the key principles. From that, we've got links to our Environmental Management Plan, Biodiversity Management Plan, Water Sensitive SA, and other places where more information can be accessed. We've also envisaged that there might be another document that sits behind it with moderate detail in it, but we don't want to reinvent the work of Water Sensitive SA or what's already out there. So it would go to the level of detail that we feel is appropriate to really get the message through, and then provide the links to more detail for those engineering considerations.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking there's probably, and it depends what the document's designed for, just as a comment rather than a question, but I guess it depends on what the document's designed for as to how far it will go, but obviously there's some development principles in there that go beyond the sort of climate stuff, which would probably be important if we're communicating to developers what we want to see, but also I think there's some great links in there. I think there's some conflict. We had a recent CEAP case, which I can think of, where there was a choice between something which was complementary in a heritage overlay compared to, and it was an option between that or having solar panels on the roof and reaching the next energy efficiency rating. Had there been something from the onset which could have managed the two together, we might have got a better outcome, but it resulted in us having to choose between the two. In saying that, there's a bunch of principles around heritage which are quite important from an environmental perspective. I mean, adaptive reuse, the best thing in terms of carbon efficiency for development is adaptive reuse, because you're not knocking down a building, you're using the existing one. So that's a very low carbon footprint compared to new development. So I think there's some great links, potential links in there with some of the other development principles that we find important.
Yes, thank you for that. I don't think we would address it in the high-level document, in the really brief one, but certainly I think it's opportunity if we take it to another level, which sits just beneath that.
Just conscious of time. Is there any last questions?
Yeah, I was just going to throw in a random one. In those principles, can we throw in the suggestion that developers, now that they're putting in covered parks, shading of our car parks, do as the City of Playford does and make them solar panelled? We've got two major chains here that have put in, and they haven't addressed making them solar. So I don't know, maybe there's a cost differential, but it would be nice to see, as we know we have some more covered car parks coming, if they would perhaps consider that as well.
Great idea.
Last question.
Just in regards to future development and the like, I mean, as we know, the PDI Act changed more recently to change for your 6-star energy rating up to 7-star energy rating. It's always about the implementation of that, though. The calculator that calculates your 7-star rating, you know, the changes that are tweaked and whatever else, are they actually making your house perform better, or are they ticking the boxes to give you that 7-star energy rating? The argument there would be, look, it's better than the houses that were getting built early 2000s, but is it the best practice of the building? It'd be great if council had the ability to be able to give a little bit of a cheat sheet to future homeowners as part of the development process to say, you know, these are some simple, this change equals this star, this change, I think roof colour does come into it now. It didn't used to, which is sad. But a lot of the workarounds now are, okay, you've got a brick veneer home, we're going to have to double glaze these windows. But no one actually explains the difference in different cladding materials and different wall wraps and all those things, of how these buildings can actually be built, and you can benefit from the 7-star rating because you've thought about your orientation, you've thought about your building materials and the like. The bigger picture might be the encumbrances that come through here in South Australia. We need I think it's an 1,000-litre rainwater tank linked to one toilet that half the people don't even do because we don't check it at the end because, oh yeah, we'll chuck that in. But imagine the encumbrance that comes into it, and it's like you need a 6 kilowatt solar system as a mandatory thing as well. Bigger conversation for another day, but just noting the changes and what they actually mean to the homeowner and the future homeowner would be really cool if we were in that space helping developers educate. But yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Tim and Bryce. Appreciate it this evening. Thank you to members.
Thank you, and just following from before, I will send out the presentation and also include the document, the traffic light document from last week as well tomorrow morning. Excellent. So everybody.
Thank you very much. Now, let's take a couple of minute break and then we'll get Chair to deliver our next topic.
All right, everybody, we might get started again. Cheers, raring to go.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Youth Development Plan. I have left I feel bad since we've just borrowed an environmental presentation, but I've left a hard copy on everyone's chair. This is the first time you've seen it, hasn't been loaded to the hub. This is just a session to let you know the process that's gone into it. And then basically over the course of the next month, if you'd like to give me feedback or have a chat about it or review it, that's the opportunity. I do have a few slides to share with you. I won't do death by PowerPoint by any means, but there is a little bit to get through. Feel free to ask questions and let's get into it. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, the current Youth Development Plan was adopted in November 2013, followed an extensive engagement period with young people. Although the timeframe for the plan has clearly expired, it's still very much an active document. The principles, a lot of them are still very good. We're still using them to this day and have been included in the draft revised copy that I've given you here. It still guides Council's program delivery today. Some things have changed, but a lot of it is still quite relevant. It had 3 priority outcomes, and they were increase youth engagement in community life, improve youth health and well-being, and provide capacity building opportunities. So each outcome had 3 goals, and it had a what, a why, and a how. So I'll just show you some, hopefully you can see that. It might be a little small, but there's some snapshots from the plan. And the how is basically the actions for the plan. So it had a goal, what and why we would do it, and then how was essentially the actions we would take to implement that. So there were sort of 3 goals for each outcome, and yeah, that's what the plan looked like. So, as I previously said, it's still very much an active document for us, although outdated. We do use it still a lot. However, there have obviously been many changes since 2013 that we need to take into consideration for the new plan. One of them is the federal context. So the federal government has launched their new youth strategy called Engage. That was in, excuse me, launched in March 2024. Engage, a strategy to include young people in decisions made by government. It's very much focused on a youth voice to government. It is a very brief but punchy little document, so I would recommend having a read if you get a chance. The state government is in the final stages of developing their new youth action plan called Our Voices, Our Future. The new plan aims to provide young people with better access to opportunities, resources and support. It particularly prioritises youth that are disadvantaged in some way, so isolated, disadvantaged, marginalised, facing discrimination. Focus is definitely on access to services, housing, resources, that sort of thing, and that is scheduled to be released in April this year. And obviously for us, importantly, on a local level, we have opened the youth space. That happened in 2019. We've been operating that for a few years now, and we have a much better understanding of what works there, how it functions, how it will run, and how best to operate it. So that's something we didn't have with the old plan. So to bring it all together, we wanted to review the Youth Development Plan whilst being mindful of the local, state and federal context. We wanted to engage with our local young people to see what they really wanted in a plan. We wanted a plan that was clear and concise, that was actionable and achievable. We didn't want a plan that would be written and then sit on a shelf for the next 6 years, or a plan that was so complex that it needed its own detailed action implementation plan to go with it. We wanted a plan, the actions were in there, we could do it, and we wanted to be able to implement it as soon as it was adopted, basically. So, as with any initiative from Council, there are a few things to consider. Resourcing is always one of them. We have a 1.0 FTE dedicated to the youth space with our Youth Development Officer, who you all know, Deb, and our budget, including staffing, for all programs and initiatives is just under $185,000. Now, we all know Council's current financial position, long-term financial plan. We're not expecting any significant increases in the youth budget anytime soon, so we have to work within the parameters of what we have. It has to be achievable from that perspective. We also need to make sure that we're not putting in anything that we're not responsible for. So one of the priorities young people identified was better access to mental health services. Council's not going to hire a psychologist or psychiatrist anytime soon, but we can advocate for better services in Gawler, and we can run programs with credible facilitators that build self-esteem, resilience, well-being, that sort of thing. So keeping it realistic is really important. We also wanted it to be really easy to understand. Youth in Gawler, we focused on 12 to 25. We wanted anyone from that age range to be able to pick up the plan, read it and go, oh yeah, this is what they're doing. Easy to understand. And if possible, we also wanted some alignment with the federal and state plans, and that's mainly for funding opportunities. So if we're doing what they think is important, then hopefully we're in a good position to get a grant when they come up. So this on the slide is basically just the process we went through. It's all fairly straightforward. Took a little bit of time and was quite interesting. The engagement with the young people was particularly interesting. Their priorities were opportunities for social connection, excuse me, mental health and wellbeing, education, transition to adulthood or life skills. Cost of living was a big one, more so than any other sort of surveying we've done recently, and that was also reflected in the Mission Australia's youth survey last year. Cost of living was a massive concern for a lot of young people, and that had definitely increased. Opportunities to participate in the creative arts, access to welcoming spaces, and everyone's favourite, transport. They also repeatedly, the youth also talked about survey fatigue. They feel that they get surveyed for everything these days. Everyone wants to know their opinion, and they're sick of filling out surveys. They're happy to talk to you or do a very sort of small voting process, but sitting down with a massive long survey, they just weren't interested. So that was interesting. But yes, that was our process. So out of all of that, we went back, we reviewed everything, and we came up with the revised youth development plan. So obviously it has the context of Gawler with the federal, state and the community plan in there as well. We came up with 3 outcomes. The general outcomes after all the surveying and all the conversations with youth were very similar to the sort of 2013 plan. So we have tweaked them a little bit, but the main ethos is the same. And those are participation and connection, health and well-being, and building health and well-being and building capacity. Each outcome has actions, and they're all linked in some way to the community plan. So the what and the why and the how from the previous plan has been removed. We did want to streamline it and make it really clear. It just removed a layer of, I guess, wording around it. So if I just go back to slide 5, see goal 7, you may not be able to read it, but the goal is actually embrace a success-based approach. There wasn't much of it, but there are a few things where it's kind of just corporate speak. It doesn't really mean anything. How do you measure that? We just cut that kind of stuff out. So, and I have given you the document. If you turn to pages 10, 11 and 12 in the draft plan, and there's plenty of time to read it, so basically there's about 5 weeks for feedback available. That you can see the 3 outcomes with the associated actions and then the links to the community plan. There are some actions which could have easily gone in each of the 3 outcomes. To avoid duplication, we've just kept it in one. No point just saying the same thing over and over again, even though they would work across nearly all 3 outcome areas. And they're really focused on providing activities, opportunities, spaces and connections to young people, advocating for youth when needed, but also building their capacity to engage and advocate for themselves. And it promotes the Youth Advisory Committee a little more than it did in the previous plan, because that's really our direct voice to council for young people. Fantastic opportunities. They can see a path into government through that with Cody and Councillor Shanks and Ethan and Isaac. So in regards to the monitoring and evaluation of the program. We hold a youth advisory committee meeting roughly every second month, and there's always a written youth development officers update report. There's a dedicated section in that report for the youth development plan, so that will be the mechanism for reporting and monitoring the implementation of the plan. The youth advisory committee will become a forum for that. And of course, all of our recommendations and reports go up to council anyway. So this is the final slide. Quick, much quicker than environment. We'll be sharing the draft plan pretty widely for feedback, including with local young people, youth advisory committee. And then we'll be taking some time to incorporate that feedback, update the draft plan, and presenting it to council again. We're hoping for May adoption. So basically, if you just take the draft away, have a good read through it. If you'd like to meet with me and talk about it, or just send through some feedback in email, anything would be wonderful. More than happy to talk about it further. But yes, very brief, but thank you for your time. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Chair. To do with, on page 11, promote Gawler as a regional hub. Why the word hub?
I guess that's just the wording for the, in 2.4.1, that's just the wording from the community plan. So that was just that's the link. So I can't change the wording of the community plan.
The only reason for asking it, I'm also a ratepayer in the Goyder Council, and I've attended their youth meetings up there, and they said, what does the word hub mean? And that sort of stuff, you know, and the young people are just so positive, and every time I've ever been to a meeting here, it's so great to see the positiveness come out of it. I suppose my other question is regarding numbers, well, say over the last 12 months or 2 years, has this increased? Because I don't think I know any other organisation and group that the amount of flyers and things that are promoting what the youth in Gawler are doing. I'm just wondering the benefits of all that, because it must be an enormous amount of money being spent on those coloured brochures as regards to is it increasing membership, and where actually is the membership coming from? You may or not be able to answer that this time.
It varies on the program. So we run a variety of different programs. During the term, it's almost it's a repeat program, so people will come for 6 to 8 weeks after school for a term program. They are smaller because they're held in the youth space, so we are limited in the size that we can have in there. Generally, no more than 20 people for an after-school program, and we run 3 of those a week throughout the school term. On the school holidays, we run more once-off events, so it could be a full day doing Dungeons and Dragons, or we might be filming a youth video that's really popular at the moment, filming and producing short films. So I think the last time we did that, we had 40 people, and then if we're talking about a much bigger event, like the skate park event or a youth week event, we would expect hundreds. So it really does depend on the type of event, the place we're holding it, and what we're hoping to gain from it. If we're partnering with someone, so we partnered with the library for the Career Expo that we held last year, that had about 400 people come through. So it really just depends on the type of event. But the promotion does go into it. Youth themselves, mainly, they see what we promote on Facebook. No, not Facebook, Instagram. Parents see Facebook and the flyers. So if we're running a program that we want parents to think, oh, that's good for my child, we tend to bump up the paper a bit more. If it's something for youth, then we tend to go more with the online promotion. Yeah. But it's a delicate balance, yeah.
So, well, firstly, to respond to Brian, some of these programs are actually the biggest I've ever seen them. I went along to the drama play on Saturday for the Fringe, and both the 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock bookings were sold out with just tables, like 10 of those big tables or whatever, and they were all, every table was filled, except I think one table just didn't show up, but they did pay for the table.
That's right, and that happens at Fringe shows. People book and don't turn up.
But that's something that is happening at a big scale now, and I think that's you know, without an increase in budget, basically we're just continuing to get a bigger and bigger uptake.
We are quite popular. Like we focus on youth from Gawler, so we get lots of requests from youth from other areas. We pop them on waiting lists. If our programs don't fill up, we let them in and we charge them slightly more. But because obviously it's for Gawler youth. So, but we are getting quite popular. I noticed Northern Sound System has recently started a drama club. I think that's because we've turned down so many Playford residents to join the drama club.
Yeah, and my other thing is the biggest thing that I think, my biggest issue with the framing of youth in the first place is that 12 to 25 is a nonsense age category. It's like if we had a 25 to 100 thing, but we didn't address retirees. Like, I think it's very lopsided at the moment. We're doing the best we've ever done with high school aged kids, but the 18 to 25 group has zero in common with a 12-year-old and is not getting much still from council or from any other group. If you're not in a sporting club and you're not at tabletop warfare, then there's nowhere for you to go as a young adult, and I think that's an area that we've had the successful after-school programs, and those have blossomed, both the drama program and the films, the youth band, which is performing at events all around now. Those are all after-school hours, sort of 13 to 17, and then the 18, 19-year-olds are sort of become the mentors and that sort of thing. But the youth is meant to go up to 25, but aside from the youth committee, which is increasingly people from the drama program, which is not a bad thing, but that's just who is active and engaged around the place. You know, I think something that I'd like to address is the young adult section in the town of Gawler really doesn't have much, you know, and that's not just the youth programs, but even the fringe opening, for example. I think, you know, obviously the budget scaled back and everything, but it started to be catered more to a family aspect rather than being anything that an early 20s person choosing between the pub and the, you know, and the silent disco or whatever, you know, it's a great silent disco. I loved your dancing, Councillor Sample. But, you know, it's not something that young adults really, so that's just, I think, a major, we're doing the best we've ever done with teens, but I think the other half of the youth demographic is still underrepresented there.
I completely agree with that, absolutely. A couple of things though. Thank goodness our youth has expressed that they are suffering from survey fatigue. So maybe it's time for us to look at other ways of engagement. And an obvious one that comes to mind is focus groups. I think as an organisation, we've really relied on the old, you know, survey this, survey the other. There are other ways to do it, and I think we need to get a bit more sophisticated and move into that arena quickly. The other thing is, thank you very much for your presentation, Chair, particularly the comments you made about making sure that we advocate for some things, because I think a lot of our community think that because we're responsive, that we're therefore responsible. And one of the reasons I was looking back through annual reports today, and it wasn't in the annual report, it was in the former community plan, is that we have many different roles as local government, and we probably need to reinforce that. And we're not always the service provider. And as you know, we're an advocator, we're a facilitator, we're the leader, we're the owner custodian, or we're the regulator. And I think we need to keep stressing that, because I think because we're active, people think we're going to do it, and that's not necessarily our role. And if we make it really clear, and in this case with our youth, then we can teach them the skills to do that, to advocate or to, you know, or to lead or to facilitate. And I think that's a really important life skill for everybody. And I think it's, again, something we should be explicit about, because I think there's a lack of understanding. So thank you.
Just to, I think, had a point about building on what Councillor Davies has said about, I think some of the feedback we've had is really good, and some of the actions that obviously match up with these things is really important, because I think they can, obviously there's definitely that side which Councillor Davies mentioned. We've got, you know, people 18 to 25 who don't have activities to do around the town, but equally some of the feedback suggests that these are potentially extremely busy people as well, people who are working, people who are studying, people who are unlikely to show up to events. But I think it's good because we've still managed to capture that there is a point where they do still get benefit from some of the things that we offer, like you've got the, all those upskilling and resume building and leadership stuff. There's things about getting involved in different community events and things where, or if there's a particular thing which people are extremely passionate about, they do have capacity to get involved, but it's not necessarily, okay, we're going to put on this event for 18 to 25-year-olds and want everyone to show up. So I think that's a really important part that, you know, needs to be emphasised in this plan, is that we're not going to have 100% engagement all the time, and it doesn't just need to be activities, because I think unfortunately youth can often fall into that. We can often fall into that sort of myth about young people that all they want is events, and I think that this highlights it well.
Thank you.
Chair, I just want to say a few things too. I think what Councillors Davies and Solomon said would, echo their words. I always think like we do a lot of really good stuff at the moment, and as Isaac was just saying, it is quite diverse too. I think it's really good that we're still looking on how to improve, and the plan is obviously the cornerstone document for that. A little bit like I was saying earlier with the climate change stuff, you know, and I'm sure this is work you and your team's already doing, but again, kind of meeting the audience where they're at. So, you know, kids that are obviously engaged in the youth space, great, that provide feedback, but they do represent, you know, if we do want to grow this to other youth in the area that might never have heard of us, how can we do that? So is it, you know, engaging with schools where there is, you know, primary or high school age students, engaging with tertiary students that use the tertiary hub here while studying. And then also, as it was sort of touched on, this is not easy to do in the slightest, but engaging with them, not just with a survey monkey. And how you do that, logistically complicated, but to be able to get that input from not only the kids that are at the drama programs, but young people that are at the skate park, and then got people in their early 20s that are studying here, and then year 10 students at local schools. Like that, for me, is the real cross-section. Not only will you get, you know, great and valuable feedback for a much broader section, but also then they'll hopefully be more likely to be engaged with, you know, what they're saying they want to achieve. So, look, I'm sure you and your team are already doing that sort of stuff, but I guess for me it is, I think what we do now, we do really well. It's now striving for that next step of how can we broaden that reach to make sure we're trying to, I guess, engage a wide variety of young people.
Oh, definitely, and we're well aware that the young people that are on the Youth Advisory Committee are not necessarily representative of the majority of youth within Gawler. You know, they are very civic-minded, have that particular interest, and about going out and meeting them where they're at. So that's something we're quite keen to do more of, and partnerships with other areas within our division, attending reconciliation events, things like that, working with the library a bit more. So we're trying to do that more and more. Schools have been really difficult since COVID. It's starting to get a little easier now, but essentially it was a bit of an iron curtain and you couldn't get in pretty much for quite some time. So we're just starting to rebuild those relationships and get back out there now. But it has been particularly tricky with schools. So.
No, that's fair enough. And of course, that's not to say for one moment that the young people involved at the moment are not, of course, and they are representative, but I know what you mean. In any decision-making body, this elected body, not, discounted from that, we need diversity as much as we can in regards to a range of different aspects. And kind of like Councillor Davies is saying, 12-25, fantastic, but that is still a huge, to try and capture as many inputs as we want is 100%. A huge aspirational goal, but I think one that we, are definitely doing a good job at. We're not doing a bad job at it, but just how can we do better?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Councillor Shanks. Sorry.
Just in regards to providing feedback, are we able to get this in a digital copy?
Yep.
And then even if when we do get that attachment, maybe even just a couple of conversation starters. I mean, like, you know, just around what you'd love to be able to hear from us, because I can read this document and I can turn around and go, yeah, look, this all sounds great. But yeah, is it a formatting question? Do you think things are covered? Just a couple of like key conversation starters, I think, might net a more consistent feedback stream. Because I can see myself reading this and going, oh yeah, it looks great.
Cool.
And then benefiting because I'm on the advisory committee and just helping the conversation there. But in actual fact, you don't have anything that's collatable. So yeah, just a little bit of feedback there. I do like the actions, although I love seeing actions that are something that runs its course and then ticked off. But I do note this space isn't that area. It's always about building on our strengths, and some of the actions are something that will be completed next year and the year after and the year after and the year after. But I guess just like any plan, if we are showing a bit of updates moving forward, which comes after this is adopted, obviously, just being able to give these are the programs we ran under this action, and this one worked really well. This one we're looking on improving because the uptake wasn't quite there. You know, I think that actually substantiates the actions that are ongoing rather than the ones that come to completion. And I think that's a good communication piece as well, to say what we're doing in the space, because these actions are all warranted. Picking up on the 18 to 25, I do like the actions in the plan that you've got already, in that the work and upskilling space. And I'd love to see maybe a little bit more around it, even to the point of, you know, if we're talking to our external groups and the like, you know, I go to the wellbeing program that's happening at Williston, for example, and what they're doing with their canteen, rostering, and what they're hoping to link in with the other sporting clubs and doing, and then where does that then fit into what opportunities the youth space offers? Because they're also assisting with like the resume writing and the mock interviews, and I thought that was a really good process. That the two minds of you guys and them would be a really good collaboration.
Doing a lot of interesting things at Williston. So
Well, there you go. So already happening, as Councillor White already guessed. But again, that consistency in being able to give those presentations to presentation night at a footy club or a basketball club or anything. What opportunities are around in that space? It'd be great to understand that too.
And also, sorry, quickly, Brian, actually, talking to the Youth Advisory Committee members and actually engaging with them on how they'd like to be engaged, that's your best bet. We can talk all night about forms of engagement, but might as well go to the people that are going to be engaged.
I got somebody else. But it's also interesting, Peterborough and also Goyder, one of the things that they started, and really it's written into this here, and also some of the things that have been said here tonight, is that every now and then have a guest speaker from the community to come and talk. Like, for instance, get Chris to come in and talk about what he does as a CEO. Why does he want to be a CEO? Get Ethan to come in and talk about, all the girls will probably fall in love with him, but the thing is, something interesting for them to also take out of the meeting, other than the meeting procedures. But I've said before, you know, I've attended meetings and I've felt so proud of the way the meetings are run. I would imagine that it's the youth officer that's training that, and it's a real credit to her. But getting somebody to come every now and then to come on in, it breaks it up. I mean, we've got a car club with 875 members, and I don't think they've had a guest speaker for the last 2 months, you know, and we should be wanting somebody to come in and talk about motor cars and things like that, you know. Mick could probably come in and talk about Harleys, you know. But I think it's interesting to have somebody else to break a bit of the atmosphere, and our young people need that, I believe.
Excellent. Thank you. I will say Deb has really done a lot of work with the committee to get them comfortable speaking in that formal setting. It's been a long time, but she's definitely worked really hard to get them speaking more in the meeting procedures, which is excellent to see.
Chair, when you send it round, can you also send it the link through to the federal, what did you call it? The
engage.
Can you send it? Yeah, could you put that in that email so we can have a look too? Thank you.
Yeah, sure can. I believe it's going up on the hub tomorrow, so I'll just include the links in there.
Councillor Kosh, you had a question?
Look, I'm just looking at a page here, and it looks at 18 big life milestones to celebrate and reflect. And it talks about, childhood, and then it talks about adulthood. I mean, it says, life milestones for adulthood and beyond, leaving home, etc., etc., etc. I mean, there's a real distinction between youth and adult. So I think when you start talking about 18-year-olds, they're really adults, and they're different people. And I don't know how we're going to encompass things like all the things that the life, the milestones that adults experience and have to go through within a council program. I understand where people are thinking, but I don't know how it works. I really, really don't. Because I know, for example, life milestones for adult and beyond, leaving home, okay? Number one, earning money, falling in love, making major purchases. I mean, they're all your the milestones in your life that you have to experience and move through as you go into adulthood. I don't know how we're going to do anything, and that starts at 18 to 25. I don't know how we're going to satisfy those big life things in our little program, really. I mean, it's probably nice to think of, youth up to 25 for certain things, access to university and all those sort of things. But these are serious life milestones that people should be thinking about. We shouldn't. I'd get concerned if we're going to be trying to deal with this at a youth program.
But Councillor Kosh, we have an ageing well workshop, a work group.
Yes, that's fine.
Who focus on things that we can promote and advocate for when you're in the ageing stage of life.
That's right.
So you can't not do all. I know. But we're not necessarily about providing it all. It's about bringing information to people's attention.
Well, if that's all it is, that's fine. But don't expect to, have working with people about leaving home and, finding a job and falling in love and, finding a partner and,
I might
all that
just
sort of
If
stuff.
you can find a program that has all of those things, I'd be very interested in going into a business partnership with you.
I know, but we can't produce that.
I just want to say, so we're not expected to produce all of those things, but no one's saying that. But there are certain things in there that I think you're right. Huge life lessons that many different parts of a child growing up or a young adult need to experience. One, for example, a big thing you said in there about growing up is about earning an income, moving out of home, that sort of stuff. Well, I know that we provide training, we provide resume writing courses. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but to a young person that maybe doesn't get to experience that or hasn't had the opportunity to experience that, that could be a life-changing moment. And even if it isn't a life-changing moment, it's still a huge step in their development as they grow into an adult. So you can't sit here and say, oh, unless we do all of these things and basically shape a child, we shouldn't be doing it at all, because that's like, well, goodness me, what are we doing? Is there anything? That's a moral question.
All I'm saying is that we need to
if we can't do something perfectly, we shouldn't be doing it at all.
I think we should be careful about our expectations of what can you actually
no one
achieve.
is saying these. No one is expecting
Well,
us to.
I've heard comments around the table.
Oh,
that
tell me
very
where they
similar.
are. But no one is saying that we expect to fully develop a child into an adult, and no one is expecting us as a local government authority to do something 100% perfectly. Because if that was the case, then I think we'd all be AI robots if that was the case.
I get concerned when we start moving off into other areas that I think we can't even start to attempt to look into.
I don't want to enter into any debate, but I think there is potentially a valid concern there from Councillor Kosh, which I think is important to note, that we can't do everything. But in saying that, I hear what Councillor White is saying, we're not doing everything. And I think when we're talking about, particularly, particularly vulnerable young people and stuff, we need to make sure that we do have the appropriate links there to be able to connect them with the people and the services that they need to access. But in saying that, I do think that there's a real strength, and I've personally experienced it, and I've seen others who have personally experienced it, whether it's something as simple as going to uni for the first time. You know, why do people have study groups? Why do you have any, why do you have anything like that? You can study alone. It's because that sense of community, and it's that weight that's lifted off from having a community around you who's experiencing similar things. And I know for a lot of people, when we first did the tax programs and stuff, there wasn't a high uptake, but over time there was a couple of people who really benefited from, could never learn from it. People going, I could never learn from my parents or school or anyone how to do something as basic as this. I never knew how to write a resume, and it was actually pretty important for them. And not only that, but they had other people in that space that they could bounce ideas off of. And I'm not saying that it's going to solve all of the world's problems, but having a community of people who are going through the same things at the same time is almost just as important as having access to those services that we don't provide. And like things like the Climate Emergency Action Plan, it's not up to Gawler Council to solve climate change, but there is a part that we can play as part of that ecosystem. And I think that's what we really do here. And I think Councillor Kosh's concern is probably a valid one, in that we don't want to do too much or advertising that we're doing everything. At the same time, I definitely don't think that's what we're doing. And I think that community building and that capacity building, which is mentioned in here, is exactly the kind of space that we need to be in.
The reason why I brought this up, because I just felt the conversation was starting to run a little bit beyond where we should be with this program. That's all. The conversation around this table, I felt, was running a little bit beyond the means of our youth program. So I just wanted to say that.
So I guess in terms of, so Councillor Solomon was saying earlier, it doesn't have to be programs and events for 18 to 25. Like, if you look at the federal government context one, none of these dot points are about programs or events. It's the main 3 points. We will recognise and listen to young people. We will empower young people to advocate and engage with government. We will support government to work with young people. And that's the sort of stuff that, our youth committee gets involved in. But, these things are not necessarily, we do after-school programs, but not everything has to be in the format of an after-school program. There can be a bunch of advocacy work in just getting young people engaged with realising that council is something that's worth being engaged in. That, because there's plenty of people who would be quite interested if they realised, but it's, there's often a very low uptake in local government engagement from younger people for various reasons. Part of it's just when you rent, sometimes you just travel around to a different council area every year, and so you never attach. But, part of it's also just people thinking, oh, well, if I'm a renter or whatever, this, as 95% of, under 25s are, unless they've got an inheritance, then there's a bunch of stuff that's relevant to them that, from the advocacy, from the listening to them, having their voices heard, providing them with opportunities to get involved. That's sort of what I think we could be doing. And I think that's what the youth committee is about, but it's also, that's not necessarily always been used to its full potential in terms of, I think we have youth committee meetings that have been sort of, all right, let's approve the youth sponsorships, half an hour, meeting closed, and it's sort of like, well, how could we have incorporated the decision-making of the council into a focus group situation or something else that provides valuable feedback? And all these sorts of things. And I think that's something that in that 18 to 25 bracket, there's a lot of good stuff that could be done there. So I think that's my thoughts on that. We definitely don't need to just ramp up the number of programs. We have one FTE who's quite busy. Yes. But, there's a lot of stuff that we could be doing just in, you know, for example, what we offer with our youth committee or things like that. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you.
So just hopefully to curb any discomfort, I think the conversation around employment or the next level after high school actually just comes out of one of the actions that talks about one of our actions wanting to be provide opportunities, workshop, courses, programs for personal and skill development, including but not limited to study skills, resume, employment skills, budgeting, goal setting, leadership, transitioning to adulthood. So I think that's a very positive action, but I certainly don't see that as come with me when you're 18 and we'll get you to 25. You know, it's more. It is more about, and again, this is that link that you need to look at it through the lens of the community plan as well, where it talks about those advocacy partnerships and the like that we endorsed in our community plan. If I'm misreading, please correct me. But I don't think at any level we were talking about taking on a mentor life coaching position in this business. I don't believe that at all. Nor did I pick up any of that flavour of the room or through this document, albeit I've just skimmed it. But
No, no, that's not the intention. Any other comments or questions?
Just one from me. And I was reflecting on this in terms of how we engage. There seems to be higher levels of social anxiety with our young people, and so there's a broad statement, it's obviously not for everybody. Just want us to have a think about the strategies we use to engage with that group, because I think focus groups are amazing and very powerful, but I know there's a whole group that will be absolutely scared to death of coming out to a focus group, and I just want to make sure we cover the spectrum of people and how we engage, that's all.
Okay, my experience is you don't ask them to come to you, you go into them. So, it's there are ways to do things.
No. The anxiety I'm talking about is youth that literally struggle leaving the house. Yeah, that's the little group I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I have lots of notes. Thank you very much. I will share the documents. Sarah will pop them on Hub tomorrow, and we'll pop the links for the federal and state plans as well. The state one is still in draft though, so they're planning on releasing that in Youth Week.
Thanks, Chair. Chris, can I just reinforce that? I think Councillor Koch said at the beginning, some prior reading does help. We're responding as we're swatching stuff here, so I know both models have their place, but yeah.
No, I took that on board, and so where we can, we'll make a commitment to getting that out. No worries at all.
Thank you.